Yeah, right. Test. Okay, sweet. So thanks. Yeah, right. It's pretty good. It's not perfect. I'm still waiting for them to let us export them. That's something I talked about 2 weeks ago. This is a pretty new thing that Google's doing with Google Slides, which is pretty much the reason that I used Google Slides instead of PowerPoint. It's still pretty good, and but it doesn't let you export them. So right now you kind of lose these unless you're recording it some other way or whatever. But it's one example of a tool, I guess. So in thinking from kind of a K-12 standpoint, what kind of practices are we trying to foster, and how do we do that? What's out there? How do we determine what's good or not? I want to kind of start with a few examples. So we know Padlet, which I don't want to overlook just because we're using it. That's a really powerful tool to kind of bank some information to have people quickly within a few minutes, like we just did, kind of collaborate and start a conversation. At any level, we can really do that. One thing that I've used with my students is a program called Satori. So Satori is just a website. It's satori.com, and you can make what they call boards. They market them kind of as as a presentation tool, but it wouldn't have to be a presentation tool. The one that you guys are seeing is actually from a unit that I teach about the Cold War. And the gist of this is that it's almost like a little Facebook timeline or some kind of social media timeline where you post different content. Can be text, can be video, it can be an infographic, it can be kind of really whatever kind of content you're looking for. And it kind of lives on this little web page. So students can access it. They can review the videos or read the material that's on there. They can comment on it, which means they could put a text or they could link their own assignment. It's really, you could use it in a number of different ways. It's free for kind of the items that you're seeing, but when I click the plus right here, there's a number of things that you do have to pay for. To be honest, I don't totally understand why audio and video have the little lock next to it, because they let you put YouTube in there. So in that way it is still free, I guess, but sorry. It's just open. It's just free. Anybody. I guess it could be either. I think they usually sell them by like a student license. So you'd buy a certain number of seats, basically.
So what you've done so far has not been paid.
Correct. Yeah, this is all free. And they let you make an unlimited number of kind of boards as well. Sometimes different programs will limit the number you can make, but this one doesn't. So Satori is one example I really like. My big takeaway from using this was that in the unit that I made, I put way too much information. It was very overwhelming to the students. And when I go back and revise it this year, I'm going to take some stuff out. You can see in a second here, I kind of click in the center, and that's how you add stuff, and that's also how you take stuff away. So I might break this up into different pieces or different boards, but that's one neat takeaway of this tool, is that you can revise it pretty easily because it does have kind of that open format. Another idea, if we just want students to express their learning in some way, we're not necessarily directing them toward content, but we want them to express what they've learned. And I apologize because this came out a little bit fuzzy, and I'm not sure why. But Canva is a good tool to do this. So on the side there, you can see me making sort of a postcard or like a kind of a poster image. They have a ton of free content. The way that they sell material is usually through, you can buy like a certain background for like $1, or you could buy a certain image for like 50 cents or $1, and it's kind of like piece by piece. So it's a little different. Some tools are starting to do that, and then others you do kind of, you buy the license per kid. If we want maybe we're not working on writing, especially at a K-12 level. If we're not working on writing, a lot of kids they give you a much fuller answer just by speaking. And Anchor is a tool that we can use to basically make podcasts, or really just to record student voice in any way. So you can, at anchor.com, you can either upload audio that you've already created, or there's a built-in feature to record right on that site. They have some transitions you can plug in, and it's not too difficult to kind of navigate and make a podcast. I had showed a group of 9th and 10th graders this, and they could pretty much figure it out without me giving a lot of guidance. They could pretty much kind of play around and use it within a few minutes without me teaching them how.
That's free.
The Anchor is free. I believe there are upgrades to it. I haven't used the upgraded version, but I believe that there are more features. As another example, iCivics, if anyone in here works specifically in social studies, this is one of my favorite examples to actually use a digital text as a teaching tool. So this isn't for students necessarily to express their understanding. This is kind of a new sort of text in that they're gaining information. In this game, they happen to be the president, and they have to go to all the different departments and complete these tasks. And it's teaching them about government and how the kind of how a bill becomes a law to an extent. And there's no assessment in this one other than did you complete the game, but this is essentially teaching through a text in a different way, just using a digital tool. So what do I think of when we're searching for high quality materials? I kind of come back to this question. Do I want the text to be, or do I want the tool to be just a text where we're providing students with some content in some way, and we're doing it in an engaging way, we're doing it in a way that's maybe they can edit it in some way or manipulate that text in some way to show different data or different pieces of that text, or look at it from different perspectives in some way? Or am I doing it as an activity in and of itself? So am I doing it as a way for students to express their understanding, or to create something, or to kind of demonstrate a skill they have? Or am I doing it just as a way to kind of raise engagement and expose them to information in a different way? And it really, I think there's room for both of those things in good teaching, but that's kind of the first question that I look for is, what's my purpose in kind of, is it to expose them to a text, or is it to have them engage in an activity? And often it's both, but sometimes it's kind of one or the other. This is a neat graphic that I use sometimes too, as kind of a glass half full, half empty kind of thing. Is it engaging? Is it accessible? Is it something that kind of meets my instructional needs and fits into the design that I already have, right? Is there something about this that's going to drive their motivation? Is there something about this that makes it more accessible? Now, depending on your use, you don't necessarily have to check all of these boxes. Sometimes you're going to want to, and sometimes you might say, you know what, this is, not overly engaging, but it is a really good tool for what I'm trying to get the kids to understand. And sometimes you can say, hey, this is super engaging and fun, but it just doesn't meet my purposes, and so I have to kind of lay that one aside. And so this is just a graphic that I've found helpful in picking materials. So far, so good. Okay. I'm gonna only half answer this question because this is Eileen's expertise, really.
And that's actually
So,
that link also needs some work, which I was like, oh yeah, but I'm gonna do the presentation before I make this record.
It is already quite good. So part of my kind of preparation was to go to that and look at some pieces that we already have going, right? So Eileen is really going to cover where can we find some of these things, and some of these are on Eileen's site, and some of them are things that I had used on my own. Any of these places are sort of like a database for OERs. Some of them are just straight like links to different tools, but many of them, especially this OER Commons, it's edited and it's sort of annotated for kind of what is the quality of this tool. There are reviews on all of the tools. There are links. There are examples sometimes. And like I said, some of these databases have that. EdSitement also has some additional information other than just the link. But these are some of the ones that I've used. And I know Eileen is going to show us some other ones too. in addition to databases, I think there's a sort of an emerging field of either people on Twitter or bloggers or people that contribute to places like EdWeek or sites like that, that they're curating these materials, and it's almost, I try to find those people and just kind of digitally kind of stalk them and see what they're posting and what are they sharing, because often that's how I find material too, in addition to kind of the conversations we were talking about, is kind of going to those places where new tools are popping up. So kind of to synthesize that into something that I hope is useful, I try to think about in my role, what's the purpose of a given tool and what purpose do I want to use it for? So those aren't always the same. It's not always a problem that they're not the same. You can use a tool for an unintended use. But that's something to think about. And then how can my students best access whatever content I'm trying to teach, whatever content or skill, as well as how can they express that they've learned it, right? So maybe it's a multimedia text, or maybe it's an old-fashioned piece of paper that I found is just really helpful. Maybe it's a digital product that they can make, or maybe it's an essay that they could just as well write on paper, but we're just gonna kind of go to the bottom of the SAMR model, or the shallower end of the SAMR pool, and just kind of have them do it on Google Docs. That's fine, but I try to think about those things. And it leads me to kind of the second level there of, okay, given the answers to that kind of top level, what are the best tools that I know of, right? And always trying to find more. When are times when I can, for lack of a better word, sort of multitask? So you're addressing content and skills. As an example of that, I was teaching students about media literacy, and I found this really awful PowerPoint from a textbook company. It was one that it looked like it came from like an online textbook, and it let you download it. And when I looked at it, it was atrocious. It was great information. It was good skills, and it was important information for students to know, but it was really poorly laid out, and there were like these awful transitions. And so what I did was I said, hey, students, I want you to edit this PowerPoint, basically. I want you to practice your digital presentation skills, but at that same point, you're reading the PowerPoint and you're kind of making it friendly, you know? So in that way, you're using a digital text, and it's an old school one, right? It's a PowerPoint. It's nothing brand new. And you're providing them with some content, but they're also practicing a skill at the same time. I try to look for those. It's not always possible, but I try to look for opportunities to do that, kind of be creative. And then the last point is really, to what extent given your environment, to what extent do you need to lead activities until students really grasp the tools really well? And to what extent do you need to provide scaffolding and kind of a gradual release so that they're meeting their objectives, not just wrestling with some tool? Sometimes wrestling with a tool is fine. But if that's not, like if your objective is to teach a certain piece of content and they're trying to figure out how to make a Canva presentation, I don't want them to spend half of their time messing around on Canva. So that's a question that is always kind of a check in the back of my mind. Like, are we still working toward the objectives, or are we stuck at a tool right now? So last, kind of some final takeaways. There's a million things out there, and there's a million places to look. There's databases, blogs, and people on Twitter. I think one area for me is to especially try to find more blogs and people online that are sharing these things on an individual basis. Kind of carefully select and reflect on what tools you're using. And as far as kind of an implementation from that sort of lens, you need to provide staff with these kind of learning experiences as well. And you need to really listen, I think, on what teachers are saying. Maybe it's not that they don't know how to use the tech. Maybe it's that they don't know how to manage the class while using the tech. Or maybe it's that, that's not the problem either. Maybe it's that they really don't have the skills to use that tech themselves either. So how could they teach it to someone else? And I think when I was making this, I kind of thought back to some 7 Habits stuff with really actively listening and trying to find out within your environment what is going on, what are the barriers to implementing these sorts of practices. And I think, I mean, I'm sure that's work that we've done with schools that are going one-to-one in this area. And so it's something that is kind of still in progress, I guess.